For generations, my family practiced a sacred tradition called the clearing, a ritual meant to bind us together. But I knew it was a lie, a tool used to fund my brother's destructive life at my expense. When they demanded I sacrifice my future for him, I refused. What they didn't know is that I had uncovered the tradition's dark secret, and I was about to expose it to everyone. This is the story of how I destroyed my family's most horrifying tradition to save myself. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The phone call came on a Tuesday, right as my wife, Clara, and I were signing the final offer on our dream house. It was a beautiful modern craftsman in a quiet neighborhood of Charlotte, with a big oak tree in the backyard for the kids we hoped to have soon. It was everything I'd worked for. Everything I'd escaped my past to build. Then my phone buzzed, displaying a number I knew by heart but hadn't called in years. My mother. "Leo, honey." Her voice had that familiar, fragile tremor it got when she was about to ask for something. "It's time. We're calling a clearing." A cold dread snaked its way up my spine, chilling the warmth of the moment. The clearing. To an outsider it sounds almost poetic, spiritual even, but to me, it was the sound of a financial guillotine. It's our family's most horrifying tradition, a ritual masquerading as a safety net. Every few years, any member of my family can declare a hardship. The family then gathers, and we are all expected to pool our resources to clear the debt, the problem, the mess. No questions asked. It's framed as this beautiful, selfless act of Appalachian solidarity, a way we look after our own. In reality, it's a beautifully packaged system of blackmail, and for the last 15 years I was its primary target. "Mom, what is it this time?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Clara shot me a worried look from across the table. She knew what this call meant. "Sir brother, Leo, Dylan's in some trouble." Of course it was Dylan, my younger brother, the charming, reckless black hole of the family. He was the one who never left our small, economically dying hometown in the mountains of North Carolina. He was the one still living in my childhood bedroom at 32. Chasing one get-rich-quick scheme after another, each one ending in a bigger disaster than the last. He was the golden boy who could do no wrong, and I was the responsible son who was expected to clean up his messes. "And Colonel?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be vague and designed to elicit maximum guilt. "It's not for the phone, honey. You need to come home. This Saturday, your father is expecting you." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. The unspoken threat hung in the air. "If you don't come, you are turning your back on this family, on our traditions, on everything that made you." I felt that old familiar knot of learned helplessness tighten in my gut, the one that told me it was easier to just comply than to fight the entire weight of my family's history. "I'll be there," I said, the words tasting like poison. When I hung up, Clara put her hand on mine. "You don't have to do this, Leo," she said softly. "We just put an offer on the house. The down payment is almost everything we have." "I know," I said, looking at the housing contract. It felt like a dispatch from another life, a life where I was free. "But you know how they are. If I don't show up, I'm the villain. The city slicker son who forgot where he came from. I have to go." But this time is going to be different. I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. The drive from the polished streets of Charlotte up into the Blue Ridge Mountains always felt like traveling back in time. The highways narrowed, the cell service dropped, and the landscape became a beautiful, suffocating green. My family's home is a rambling old farmhouse, perpetually in a state of charming disrepair. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, they were all there on the porch, waiting. My father, a stern, quiet man whose silence was a weapon. My mother, her face a mask of anxious fragility. And Dylan leaning against a post, a smug, self-pitying look on his face. He looked like a king waiting for his tribute. The cognitive dissonance of being there was overwhelming. I loved these people, or at least I loved the idea of them. But sitting in that living room, with its scent of dust and wood smoke, I felt like a stranger. My mother fussed over me, offering me sweet tea and pound cake, a classic tactic to soften the blow. My father just sat in his recliner watching me with an unreadable expression. Finally he cleared his throat. "And Leo, as you know, we're here for a clearing. Dylan has declared a hardship." I turned to my brother. "What is it, Dylan?" He wouldn't meet my eye. He just shrugged, looking at the floor. "My business partner, he screwed me over." Took all the money from the landscaping business, left me with all the debt. The suppliers, the equipment loans. You're going to sue me. I'll lose everything. It was a masterful performance of the wronged man, the victim of a cruel world. He'd used a version of this same story 3 times before. My father spoke again, his voice resonating with patriarchal authority. The total to clear it is $78,000. 78,000. The number hung in the air, obscene. It was almost the exact amount Clara and I had in our savings account for the house. They didn't know the exact figure, but they knew I'd just gotten a big promotion at my architecture firm. They always knew when I was doing well. It was like they had a sixth sense for it. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Leo, we know it's a lot to ask. Your father and I, we can sell the old truck, and we have a little saved, but we can't cover it. You're the only one who can help your brother. It's what we do. We're family. The clearing is what keeps us whole. There it was. The emotional blackmail, wrapped in the sacred cloth of tradition. For years, I had just paid. I paid off Dylan's gambling debts after he swore he'd been cheated. I paid for his failed auto detailing startup. I paid his legal fees after a DUI he swore wasn't his fault. Each time I told myself it was the last time. Each time I swallowed my resentment because fighting them felt impossible. It was a trauma bond, a cycle of abuse I couldn't seem to break. But this time, looking at the smug, entitled face of my brother and the pleading, manipulative face of my mother, something inside me finally snapped. I took a deep breath. No. The word dropped into the silent room like a stone. My mother gasped. My father's eyes narrowed. Dylan actually looked up, shocked. "What did you say?" my father asked, his voice dangerously low. "I said no," I repeated, and with each word I felt a lifetime of resentment solidifying into a spine of steel. "I am not giving Dylan another cent." My mother started to sob, a theatrical, wounded sound. "Leo, how can you be so cruel? This is your brother. He'll be ruined. This tradition has held our family together for 100 years. Has it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Or has it just enabled Dylan to be a reckless, irresponsible child his entire life, knowing that he'll never have to face the consequences because I'll always be there to bail him out? You're not asking me to help him. You're asking me to sacrifice my family's future to pay for his mistakes. Again, and I'm done." Dylan finally found his voice. "You're just jealous," he sneered. And the classic gaslighting accusation was so predictable it was almost funny. "You're jealous because I stayed here, to take care of mom and dad, while you ran off to the big city to get rich. You think you're better than us now, and you have no loyalty." "Loyalty?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Loyalty is a two-way street, Dylan. You want me to give you $80,000, but you haven't so much as asked me how my life is going. You don't even know the name of the woman I'm building a life with. You just see me as a bank account. And you," I said, turning to my parents, "you've encouraged it. You've let him get away with everything while telling me I have to be the responsible one. You created this monster, and now you expect me to feed it." My father stood up, his face red with rage. "You have shamed this family, boy. You spit on the memory of your grandfather, who started this tradition to save us all during the Depression. You are breaking the one sacred rule we have." "I don't care," I said, standing to face him. "The bank is closed." I walked out of that house, leaving a storm of shouting and crying behind me. The drive back to Charlotte felt different. It wasn't an escape anymore. It was a liberation. I had finally drawn a boundary, a hard, clear line in the sand. But as I drove, my father's words echoed in my head. "The memory of your grandfather, who started this tradition to save us all during the Depression." A seed of doubt, or rather, curiosity, was planted. My grandfather was a man I barely knew, a figure of family legend, a tough, resourceful man who had supposedly created the clearing out of love and necessity. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt off. The whole story felt a little too perfect, a little too neat. When I got home, Clara took one look at my face and knew. She didn't ask what happened. She just wrapped her arms around me. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandfather. I went online and started digging, not into my grandfather himself, but into the local history of our county. I searched old newspaper archives, public records, and historical society databases. I was looking for any mention of the Great Depression and how local families coped. And that's when I found it. It wasn't a story about a noble tradition. It was a court record from 1934. My grandfather, a man I'd been taught to revere, had been the co-owner of a small local mill. And according to the records, the mill had burned down under what the local fire marshal deemed highly suspicious circumstances. An insurance company refused to pay out, suspecting arson for the payout. My grandfather and his partner were sued by their creditors and faced complete financial ruin. They were on the verge of being charged. Then, the record just ends. The charges were dropped. The creditors were suddenly paid off. A footnote mentioned that my grandfather had received a significant, unexpected family inheritance that allowed him to settle his debts. My blood ran cold. There was no inheritance. My great-grandparents were dirt-poor farmers. I scrolled further, finding a local newspaper clipping from a week later. It was a small social notice mentioning a new family tradition started by my grandfather's family, a clearing of hardship to ensure no member would ever face ruin alone. It wasn't a tradition born of love. It was a con. My grandfather hadn't created the clearing to save his family. He'd created it to save himself. He'd invented a noble lie, a tool of emotional manipulation to pressure his own relatives into bailing him out of a potential crime. It wasn't a 100-year-old legacy. It was a 90-year-old grift. And my family had been running it ever since. I was looking at the origin story of my own abuse, and the truth was so much uglier and more pathetic than I could have ever imagined. My horrifying family tradition wasn't just horrifying because it was unfair. It was horrifying because it was a complete and utter fraud. The revelation that the clearing was a lie, a con invented by my own sainted grandfather, changed everything. It wasn't just about Dylan's entitlement or my parents' codependency anymore. This was a foundational crack in the entire mythology of my family. For the next week I was obsessed. I hired a local genealogist and researcher in my hometown, a discreet woman who specialized in digging up the skeletons in Appalachia's closets. I didn't just want to know the truth, I wanted proof. While she worked, the fallout from my refusal began. It started with my mother's phone calls, dozens of them. Voicemails filled with weeping, begging me to reconsider, telling me I was tearing her heart out. She'd say things like, "How can you sleep at night, knowing your brother is suffering because of your pride?" It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, designed to trigger a lifetime of conditioned guilt. But now, armed with my secret knowledge, her words sounded hollow, like a script being read from a very old, very tired play. I didn't answer, I just saved the voicemails. Then came my father. He didn't call, he sent a single curt email. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. You have chosen money over blood. You are no longer welcome in this house until you make this right." It was a formal excommunication. A few years ago it would have shattered me. Now, it felt like a relief. He was confirming the boundary I had already set. But Dylan was the most vicious. He launched a full-scale smear campaign on social media. He posted a long, rambling diatribe about his rich, heartless brother in Charlotte, who had abandoned his family. He painted me as a greedy, selfish monster who was letting him go bankrupt over a business deal gone wrong. He conveniently left out any specifics, of course. To my horror, dozens of our relatives and old family friends, people who had witnessed my family's dynamic for years, rallied to his side. They commented with things like, "That's what happens when they leave the mountains. They forget who they are, and blood should always come first." I was being tried and convicted in the court of small-town public opinion, and the chief prosecutor was my own brother. The worst part was, it started to work. An aunt called me, scolding me for my selfishness. A cousin I'd been close to sent me a message saying he was disappointed. The pressure was immense. They were closing ranks, reinforcing the toxic system. Clara was my rock through it all. "They're just proving your point, Leo," she'd remind me. "This isn't about family, it's a cult." A week later my researcher called. "I think you're going to want to see this," she said. "It's about your brother's so-called business partner." I met her at a coffee shop, and she laid out a file on the table. It turned out Dylan's business partner, the one who had supposedly stolen all the money, didn't exist. The landscaping company was a sham. Dylan had taken out loans for equipment he never bought. He collected deposits for jobs he never started. The $78,000 wasn't debt from a failed business. It was the amount he needed to pay back the people he had defrauded before they went to the police. This wasn't a hardship, it was felony theft. The clearing wasn't just to save him from bankruptcy, it was to make him a flight risk. They weren't trying to clear a debt, they were trying to obstruct justice. I sat there, staring at the documents. The full picture was now horrifyingly clear. My family was trying to manipulate me into becoming an accessory to my brother's crimes, all under the guise of a sacred family tradition that was, itself, a fraud. The audacity of it left me breathless. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to refuse, I was going to end the clearing. Forever. I called my father, said, my voice carefully neutral. I'll come this weekend. And I'll bring the money. There was a long silence on the other end, then a sigh of profound relief. I knew you'd come to your senses, son, he said, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. I knew you couldn't turn your back on us. I'll call the family. We'll have a proper clearing. We'll make things right. Yes, I said. We will. That Saturday I drove back up to the mountains, but I wasn't alone. In the car behind me was a man named Mr. Davies, a quiet, sharp-eyed lawyer Clara had found for me who specialized in financial fraud. When I arrived at the farmhouse, the scene was almost biblical. It seemed like my entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all summoned by my father to witness the return of the prodigal son. They were there to see me bend the knee, to watch tradition prevail. I was the cautionary tale who had come back to the fold. I walked onto the porch, carrying a leather briefcase. The atmosphere was thick with a kind of gloating pity. Dylan gave me a triumphant smirk. My mother rushed to hug me, tears of joy in her eyes. Oh, Leo, I knew you wouldn't let us down. My father clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of ownership. Welcome home, son. We all gathered in the living room. It was packed, people standing along the walls. My father stood by the fireplace, ready to preside. We are here today, he began, his voice booming, to heal a rift in this family. We are here to perform the clearing, a sacred tradition passed down from my father. A tradition that teaches us that family is more important than money, that our bond is our greatest strength. Leo has returned to honor that tradition. He gestured to me. It was my cue. Time to present the check and complete my humiliation. I stood up and walked to the center of the room, placing my briefcase on the coffee table. I clicked it open, but I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a stack of papers. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice clear and steady, projecting to every corner of the room. Shaner, the truth. And the truth is, the clearing is a lie. A confused murmur rippled through the room. I held up a document. It was a copy of the 1934 court filing. This tradition wasn't passed down to save the family during the Depression. It was invented by Grandpa to bail himself out of an arson charge. He wasn't being noble. He was covering up a crime. He manipulated his family into paying off his debts so he wouldn't go to jail. That's the real legacy of the clearing. It's a 90-year-old con. The silence was absolute. I could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of my relatives. My father's face went pale, but I wasn't done. I turned to Dylan. And the tradition of using it to cover up crimes continues today, doesn't it, Dylan? Dylan? I threw a new set of papers onto the coffee table. They were sworn affidavits from 3 of the people he had scammed. There is no business partner who screwed you over. There is no business. You took out fraudulent loans. You stole deposits from your neighbors. The $78,000 isn't a hardship. It's what you owe the people in this very community before they press charges for felony fraud. Dylan looked like he'd been punched in the gut. My mother let out a strangled gasp. I looked around the room at all my family members. For years I had been told that this tradition is about love and loyalty, but it's not. It's been a tool for financial abuse, wielded by the most irresponsible members of this family against anyone who tries to build a better life. It punishes success and rewards failure. It has crippled this family, not saved it. I finally looked at my parents, my voice softening slightly, but losing none of its resolve. I love you, but I will not participate in this lie anymore. And I will not give Dylan a single dollar to help him evade the consequences of his actions. I opened my briefcase again, but I will offer him a real clearing. I pulled out 2 things. A brochure for a top-rated inpatient treatment center for gambling and behavioral addiction, and the business card for a financial counselor. My check is not. A blank check is not. If you are serious about changing your life, Dylan, I will pay for this. All of it. I will help you become a man who doesn't need to be bailed out. That is my one and only offer. The choice was laid bare for everyone to see. A choice between real recovery and a consequence-free fantasy. Dylan looked at my parents, his face a mask of panic and rage. He knew he was trapped. My father, his face ashen, his authority shattered, just stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He didn't see a son offering a lifeline. He saw a traitor who had destroyed his world. "Get out," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Get out of my house." I nodded slowly. I had expected this. I turned to my lawyer, who had been standing quietly by the door. "Mr. Davies has copies of all these documents. He will be in touch with the families Dylan has defrauded to ensure they are made whole, using funds from Dylan's share of any future family inheritance. He will also be reporting the initial fraud to the relevant authorities." And with that, I closed my briefcase and walked out. No one tried to stop me. I could feel the weight of their shock and anger behind me, but for the first time, it didn't touch me. The horrifying tradition was broken. The spell was shattered. I later learned that Dylan, facing actual legal consequences, had a complete meltdown. My parents, humiliated and exposed, have become recluses. Most of my extended family, once they saw the proof, turned on them completely. Claire and I closed on our house last week. As I stand in our new backyard, watching the sun set through the leaves of the big oak tree, I don't feel anger or sadness about the family I lost. I feel a profound sense of peace. I didn't just save my money. I saved myself. I cleared the one debt that truly mattered, the one I owed to my own future.